Hi, everyone. Hope you're well. Thanks for joining us, whether you're joining us, watching us, or listening. Right now, we're live on Facebook, we're live on LinkedIn, we're live on YouTube. And if you're listening to us, you are listening on a podcast. It's great for you to be here. Louise Lapish is with us today. How are you, Louise?
I'm really good, thanks, Johnny. I've already been out for the dog walk, been to Starbucks. Life is almost normal.
Almost.
Other coffee houses are available.
So, Louise, your title is the Dream Career Consultant, and you're also director of Gatewood Consulting as well. You offer business mentoring, so there's a number of different things, and you're also chair of the board of trustees at Simon on the Streets. Where did the Dream Career Consultant? Where's the dream bit come from?
So I've been massively passionate about people having their dream job for years and years and years. I started as a recruitment consultant sort of after university and realised I hated it, but I really loved it when people got their job. So that was like the best bit. So being able to ring somebody and say, they loved you, this is the interview feedback, here's the job offer, was my favourite bit. Then I found career management. Now, career management in the UK has never been as popular as it is in like the States or in other countries. I didn't even know it existed. It was like career advice for adults. I just thought career advice was, don't know if you ever did those tests at school where you had to kind of tick boxes to say what you liked and disliked, and it gave you a print out. What was on yours?
I can't remember. I can't remember, but you've reminded me of that session. I can even picture the room I was in. I can't remember what it told me I should be though.
Well, mine told me I should be a librarian. So at some point I must have ticked that I liked books, which is true. I mean, but you know me, and as a massive extrovert, I can't imagine anybody worse being in a library. And the thought of having to organise the books into the Dewey Decimal System was just never going to be my thing. Detail's not my thing. And I remember looking at that and thinking, right, okay, the two options it gave me was librarian or English teacher. And I was like, right, okay. So I did an English degree, and I was like, I still don't like books and reading that much. In fact, I liked it less and less the more I had to read each week, which is why I ended up not doing an awful lot of my lectures. And I became part of the RAG committee, which was, stands for raising and giving, but it was all about charity fundraising. So was part of the team that brought Sheffield the biggest all-ticketed party in the world and all that kind of stuff. So got massively involved in stuff that was nothing to do with my course. But then realised that actually some of that stuff was the bits that I enjoyed. So rather than thinking about being an English teacher, I wanted to think about other things. Now, nobody at any point ever said to me, well, adults need training too. Because had they said that, maybe I would have gone a slightly different route. But I genuinely believe that the training came to me at a time after I'd led teams and after I'd had some P&L responsibility and kind of really understood what the world was like. I think if I'd have gone straight into training, I wouldn't have had maybe the credibility or the stories to share. I'm a big storyteller. And actually, whenever I'm training, I share the stories that the times that things have gone horribly wrong or horribly right. And I think that kind of adds value to it, really. So going back to the Dream Career Consultant, that was some social media person who told me that I needed to kind of have a title rather than just being sort of another career coach. But I differentiate between that coach and consultant quite purposely, because for me, if you knew how to get a job, if you knew how to write a CV, if you knew what you were doing wrong in interviews, you would change it. So I could sit with you for 3 hours saying, okay, so why did that interview not go so well? What might you have done differently? And you'd sit there going, I don't know. Whereas, going through, I was going through a mock interview with somebody earlier this week. And they were saying to me, oh, did I smile in that, Louise? And I was like, no, not at all. You kind of went, yes, the reason that I've applied for the job. And like people default to Sergeant Serious. So unless somebody tells them that, they're never going to know, because the interviewer doesn't give feedback anymore because it's so hard to give proper feedback. But, you can't sort of say to somebody, yeah, you need to smile a bit more in your interview. They'd be like, great feedback. But it's one of the things that I talk a lot about. Smiling.
Well, it goes a long way, and the Americans have been telling retailers to do that for years. It's so important. I remember working at Vision Express when I was doing my pre-reg optometry years, and they had a rule: 5 feet 5 seconds. You had to greet and smile within 5 feet or 5 seconds of someone walking in. So smiling goes a long way. We're going to focus this session on there's a number of different elements of your business, and we're going to focus this session on the training and the training and development side, learning and development side for teams. So in the past, you've done a lot of help to motivate teams, how to manage teams. You're now focusing very much on diversity and inclusion within teams. But before I get to that, you talked about books and you like, you told you should be a librarian. You've published a book, The 7 Steps to Career Consciousness, and that's all to do with the other side of your business, which is the career coach.
Yeah.
And you're now taking that 7 steps. You've just told me that you've become CPD Training Centre accredited. Is that right?
Yeah. So, well, in the process of becoming a CPD centre. So one of the things that was really, really important to me is when people have done training is having something to show for it. And you can go on a training course and not get a certificate and great. But when I'm actively encouraging people, and I'm a big believer in doing stuff myself, so I'm always doing training courses and learning new stuff, is having something to show for it. And one of the reasons that I picked the CPD is because I sit on a board with, as you know, for Simon on the Streets, but there's 2 solicitors there and somebody who works in finance, and they all still have to do CPD accreditation. And I was just thinking, but we could make it fun. We could make stuff that's about having positive communications, which is the bit that underpins everything I do, is about learning how to talk to people. And make some of that training fun, rather than people going, oh, I have to do my CPD points, I've got to do this many this year. So that was kind of what attracted me to doing that. But the launch of the coaching program that I'm doing for people to become an accredited 7 Steps coach is very much, for me, it was important that they came out with an accreditation, because they are going to work hard when they go through the program. Because it's so important that if you're giving somebody career support or career consultancy, as I like to say, rather than coaching, that you're doing it from a good place and you're using the right tools. So I'm a big passionate believer that if you've got the right tools, you can help people properly. If you're sitting there and you've never career coached somebody before, there might be things that you don't think about. And obviously at the minute, lots of people are thinking about changing careers. One of the stories that's in my book is taking somebody who was a project manager in insurance and getting him to work for the Forest Trust. Same project manager, same toolkit, but it was how he told his story. So that program and all of the other programs that I do around really how you tell your story and how you start to have those conversations.
The coaching that you're going to be doing it's typically for coaches that are already coaching but not doing career coaching necessarily. Is that right? And it's to try
or something, or sometimes I think we need to have career coaches in business. Some of the bigger organizations have them, but it's nothing to stop somebody who's in HR getting some kind of career coaching, or managers. I think, when we talk about talent development, which, massively links into my passion for diversity and inclusion stuff. But if that person doesn't know how to shape that person's career, then how are they going to support them as a manager? They might be able to look at holistically at an organization and go, you'd be absolutely brilliant over there, but you're not so good here. And actually fostering that talent and helping that person become the best employee they can be is massively important. And you can use the same tools and techniques and helping people make that leap from maybe, being a manager to thinking, well, actually I could be a senior manager, and ultimately that jump to the board. Because I get a lot of people saying to me, oh, well, I could never sit on a board. I'm like, why? It's not that big a deal. So I'm passionate about that getting people to recognize they can be whatever they want to be. But I've also had people go off and, one became a priest. I've had somebody set up a blanket stall. There's been such a variety of things that people have gone, actually, this was my dream and I never did it. Which is why I said I was a bit flippant about something that's going to appear in my novel, because the one thing I always wanted to be as a kid and that they never captured was a writer. So, I've published the 7 steps to career consciousness. The business consciousness is kind of in the back of my head, and I will do that one at some point. But then I've got the novel, which is in progress. So that I should have done that during lockdown. I should have.
You absolutely should have, and watch this space. It's interesting you say about how people feel that they can't sit on a board. They've got the knowledge, they could give the advice. Is it, and they're so confident in their day-to-day job. Is it just a confidence thing? What is it?
I think sometimes it's what people think that's about. So I think people really get this. They're like, oh, it's a board meeting. It's going to be, and it's like most of the time, we're just talking around normal stuff. It's not, it's nothing earth-shattering. It's nothing that's top secret. It's stuff that we should be talking about and sharing, and making people understand that it's just a part of the process. And I'm a massive believer. I'm working with a client at the minute on their diversity and inclusion program. And we've set up an inclusivity board, which is going to be employees who feed up to the managers and directors to talk about what they think the organisation should be doing. Now, in my world, I'd almost change that, and I'd have the board of directors accountable to that inclusivity board to say, look, this is what we're doing. So again, it's sometimes just about looking at that power ratio and really making sure that a board of directors is doing what it should do. And lots of them aren't. I'm sure you've been in many a meeting in your career where they're just not doing what they should be doing.
Yeah, and ultimately these are just people. They're they're just normal people like you and me in a room, and I get that completely. You brought it back to diversity and inclusion. I wanted to go into that. So part of your offering is going into organizations and really helping, I guess, leaders and teams perform better and make things better. And one of the things that you're very passionate about right now is the diversity and inclusion. And whilst things like Black Lives Matter and other things like that are very important and you're passionate about them, what you're also saying is this is also diversity in just your thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. We've heard people talk for years about left and right brained people, and I know. I'm kind of an extrovert, and I'm usually glass half full. We can do this. It's exciting. And I absolutely know I need somebody who's diametrically opposed to me to rein me back in and to say, let's just stop and have a think about these things, Louise, and let's do this. So I'm great at starting things. I'm not so great at finishing things. And recognizing that and understanding yourself then really makes it easy to start to think, okay, so if we were working on a project, how do we make this project work for the people who are involved? And that's everyone. That's your customers, that's your employees, that's your teams, and stakeholders. It's everybody needs to kind of feel part of that. Now, I know I mentioned to you when we were chatting before about the iPhone, and nobody on that team was left-handed, so the functionality didn't work for left-handed people. And it's these things that are such simple things that we never kind of consider them until it's something that happens to us. And I never knew until somebody who was a wheelchair user told me that they always put disabled facilities towards a wall, and they're like, that only works if you get out of your wheelchair on a particular side. If you use the other side of the wheelchair, you can't use it. And I was like, well, of course you can't. Why would you not put it in the middle? That makes perfect sense. But I didn't know. So I would probably never have asked, because I do that politeness thing. Whereas actually what I encourage people to do, and the reason that I talk about diversity and inclusion, is to have honest conversations. And that might be, actually, Johnny, might not be the right fit of job for you, because you've got these skills, and these skills. maybe attention to detail's not it. So maybe you'd be better off in this department. Honest conversation, but actually there's a plan and there's a reason behind it. So it could be as much about that as it can be about building diversity on boards. But we are years behind where we should be in terms of having diversity on boards. And that is never about tokenism. It's about taking the right people from when you employ them and building their careers right the way through. So, you know, we need to recognize that diversity and true inclusion and intersectionality is a massive part of what we all need to be doing.
Well, you were mentioning earlier to me that if anything, you feel that during lockdown we've become more prejudiced and gone backwards. Is that what you're seeing in organisations as well?
Well, a lot of it, it was really interesting. So the stats around gender equality were always women are massively behind because they're seen as the carers, they're seen as the people who look after people. And actually, when you look at who was homeschooling, I can't tell you how many times I saw on LinkedIn somebody posting, I'm so proud of my wife. Not only is she working from home, but she's also schooling our 3 kids. I saw that a lot. And actually it was like, well, you're both parents. Why are you not both schooling? And actually for women now to go back into a workplace and decrease that gap that they've already had because they've been off on maternity leave is more difficult. It's going to be more difficult. The only kind of saving grace I think we've got coming out of this is that we've all embraced flexible working. Now we've got so few people with a disability in the workplace. Flexible working opens all of that up. You know, we've got more flexible working in terms of women, you know, who are coming sort of off maternity leave or the main, you know, care of children might get more opportunities based on that. But we all have to consciously do it. And we all have to kind of commit to that because we've already said that it's going to put women back and it's going to potentially, you know, we're storing up for a mental health crisis. And that's going to be across the board, you know, because that's something that we want people to talk about. We want to actively encourage, but then people have got to be open and honest in that employment stage and bring on the right people and actually be committed to, you know, to helping that person and supporting them. And I got asked to do a piece of work next year and they were like, oh, the board want to be seen to be doing the right things. And my question is, are they actually committed to doing the right things? Because you can tick a box, but unless you embed it and unless you do it on a day-to-day basis, where I might just change the time of a meeting to not be 9 o'clock, it might be 10 o'clock, because actually I know a few people do the school run. So why not do it at 10 and then people have got the chance to get in and check their email and people aren't constantly rushing? Or, you know, if we've got people who are flexibly working, don't put all of the training on a Wednesday because they might not work that day and they miss out on opportunities. So it's little things that aren't necessarily the big things that we think about, but they're massively, massively important to people that want to have that sense of belonging. And if you've got a team that feel like they belong there, then you haven't got that attrition and you're not starting again and building from scratch.
But for people that are watching with us live, by the way, feel free to ask questions. Louise, I'm sure would welcome them. You're talking about what concerns me though. So it's little small things that you could do, but as you say, it's not about just a token gesture to put someone on a board.
No.
How do you? That's not a little and small thing, is it? So how do you break barriers there?
So you give people opportunities. So one of the things that I want to bring to the board next year that we want to do at Simon, I want to give an opportunity to somebody under 30 to either do some shadowing or, you know, a university student to come and shadow the board and see what we do, which of course is a lot better in a face-to-face environment than is doing it all virtually at the minute. But actually give somebody an opportunity. Because that way they've had exposure, they understand what it's like, and they're more likely to go, oh, okay, that's interesting. And actually, there's very few people under 30 on boards. We've got very few minorities on boards. And they're things that we can really look at, but we have to create space for that. And that might be a learning opportunity for a student or a graduate or just somebody else to kind of get involved. So if you are a director on a board, why not go and mentor someone, or offer to pass on some of your expertise? That's something that will have a massive impact on somebody later on. I'd love for us to get to the point where, we sponsor students so they're not coming out with student debt. Why not be a business that sponsors a place at a university and maybe make that, a diversity and inclusion thing and champion that, but also make sure your recruitment policy is right. So the Pharmaceutical Society did some interesting tweets over lockdown around how they swapped the job specs that they'd written and gave it to a male or a female. And they were like, oh yeah, no, that would stop me wanting to apply. And they really broke it down. And they were like, it was so interesting to see the words that we use as a male as opposed to a female. And there was some study that came out about saying women will look at a job spec, and if there's one thing they can't do, they won't apply. Whereas men will look down, and if there's one thing they can do, they will. Now, I mean, they had some science behind it. I don't know how true it is.
I can believe it.
But most people put a job spec out there that's like a wish list. And whether I've been in recruitment, career management, or talent development, I'm saying you can't have all of these things. You can't have somebody with all of these years' experience in this programming language that wasn't even around then, or they can't have 20 years' experience and be a graduate. But what's to say that they're not the right person for the job, or somebody different to come in and kind of give your team that diversity of thought. And I was talking to you about De Bono's 6 thinking hats, and it's a brilliant way of getting people to see that there are different ways of thinking. So I was working with a facilities management company, and they've got this improvement board, and it was like they became their change makers for the organization, but they couldn't agree on anything. They were having meetings that didn't have results. And I remember going down and being like, okay, so what's on the agenda? And they were like, same thing that's always on the agenda, but we never get anywhere. And it was just breaking that down and getting them to be having these honest conversations, but saying, you're not talking as you here, put the hat on, you're playing this character. So it might be the blue hat, which is like blue sky thinking. What would we do if we could do anything? And that, I think the blue hat for me is one of my favorites, because it's like, we could do anything. And people say to me about Simon on the Streets, they'll go, well, what do you want, from Simon on the Streets? I'm like, world domination. But ultimately what I want is for us not to need to exist. So, that's my very true sense. I'd rather we didn't have to be there. I'd rather that we didn't have to have outreach workers out there trying to make people feel more included because our system's broken. But ultimately, we do it so well. If we have to be there, I want us to be everywhere. So it's just about thinking, but then it needs somebody else to rein that back in and go, okay, well, maybe we start with Wakefield or Calderdale and then see where we go, because we already do Kirklees, Bradford and Leeds. So an interesting exercise.
Well, you've mentioned Simon and Simon on the Streets a couple of times. For those that have not heard, I mean, how have you not heard of Simon on the Streets? But for those that aren't aware, or maybe aren't in the region, just tell us a bit more about Simon on the Streets.
So Simon on the Streets, we're an independently funded homeless charity. So we help entrenched rough sleepers back into not necessarily homes, but back into a position where they can then engage with other services. So we're never, and I always say to people, we're not about the you're 2 paychecks away from being homeless type support. That's not what we do. We're the people who've led chaotic lives and maybe need to re-engage on lots of different levels. In Leeds, we're very much working at the minute with people with no recourse to funding, so migrants who don't have support, and people who've been trafficked, and some really serious issues. Bradford has its own set of issues, as does Kirklees. So 3 different areas, but 3 very different requirements that we fulfill. But there's an amazing team of outreach workers who go out and do all of that engagement piece, and they are some of the most inspirational people that you will ever talk to. If you get the chance to stop one of them and have a conversation, then do. They've got a Simon on the Streets jacket on or something, so you'll be able to spot them. But yeah, and they go out and they start, and it's little things like saying hello to somebody, or eventually. You know, it's a win for us if somebody accepts a hot drink off us. You know, that's really powerful. And things like our soup run are about creating a safe space for someone just to come and say hello. One of the things that breaks my heart is when, you know, we have somebody come up and say, no one's spoken to me for a week. People just walk past me. They don't look at me. And, you know, that just doesn't feel, for somebody who likes to talk and for somebody who's all about communication, just that basic human interaction of saying hello to somebody, massively important.
The difference that could make, I'm sure must be huge.
And it does, just a little, just, you know, we started off talking about smiling. Even if you don't want to give somebody money or whatever else, then smile and say, oh, you know, have a nice day though, because they'll go, oh, thanks.
Well, I can't not ask this. I try and avoid getting too much into coronavirus and COVID. You know, some of us have all heard enough, but it must have had a huge impact on Simon on the Street, surely. How's the charity, the organisation doing right now with this?
Simon on the Streets is truly, truly blessed to have the supporters that we do. So we had to cancel our big events. So we have our Rough Diamond Ball and our Sleep Out, which have been our two big earners for, you know, for as long as I can remember. And we had to cancel both events, but we've done the Sleep In. So we did, people were sleeping on their sofas for us, and a lot of our corporate partners have done a sterling job in raising money from that. We've got somebody who's selling merchandise on our behalf and has pledged us phenomenal amounts of money to carry on doing what we're doing. The most important thing was that we were still out there, and we use that hashtag. We were still out there throughout it. Our outreach workers, even when everybody was supposedly housed, they were still taking food. They were still making sure people were safe. They were still trying to make sure that that temporary accommodation became something more permanent. And they haven't stopped. You know, the team have not stopped. It's not going to get any better. The numbers are probably going to go up.
I was about to ask you that.
Yeah. If you look at some of the reasons why people end up homeless, they're coming at us thick and fast at the minute. You know, mental health issues, relationship breakdowns, you know, job losses. There's a whole kind of, unfortunately, probably a wave of this coming, and we just need cleverer ways of dealing with it than what we do at the minute.
You just talked about redundancies, actually, and I've heard you talk before. You say being made redundant is a bit like leaving a bad relationship.
Yeah.
Talk to me more about, because one of the things you do is career coaching and helping people that are made redundant. Yeah. So just talk to me a bit more about that.
But it actually links into the stuff that I do with teams as well. And I implore leaders, if you are making people redundant, do it the right way. You know, because having that conversation with somebody and explaining to them that it's not about them and it's a business decision, and paying, you know, for outplacement and just to have somebody on their side makes a massive difference to how much they bounce back from being made redundant. It is normal now for people to be made redundant one or, you know, two times in their career, maybe even more, depending on where you are. And actually how that's handled changes how that person feels about it. So when I talk about it's like leaving a bad relationship, I talked to somebody the other day, and they're not a client of mine, but they'd called me up because they were wanting some advice. I wasn't the right person for them. They needed a different type of advice, but 27 years they'd worked for the same company and then got told by a virtual call with everybody else that they were being made redundant. And they were like, I put them first before my kids' birthday parties, before this, before that. So all of the emotions they're going through, that everything I gave to you has been betrayed, is like that ending a relationship. You know, so they've got to work through some of that stuff before they feel that they can move on to the next position. And that's crucial, because the quicker they bounce back and go, okay, that's great, the easier they're going to find it to go into an interview and never talk about how awful their last place was, how betrayed they felt, but talk about what's coming and the future. That's much better for them. Much better for them.
A lot of your work must be counselling.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's a clear point where I signpost to other places. There are people who are on that cusp of needing counselling. I'm a straight talking Yorkshire woman, Johnny. I don't do counselling. What I do is have enough confidence, belief, and positivity to help people get over that hump. And it's the same with sort of whether I'm training or whether I'm coaching. People just don't necessarily believe they can do it. And if I'm going, okay, these are the steps. If we do these steps, you can do it. They go, oh, okay, then. And if you help them on those steps, they do it. It's no difference to turning someone who's, entrenched or sleeping and helping them see the steps to being able to, be housed and whatever else. Same thing. You've just got to support people on those steps and make it work for them, whatever you're doing. People don't want to do it alone, but people will ask for help.
Yeah. You're outside of work, you're a big theatre goer.
I am. Well, not this year, but usually, yeah.
That must be a bit difficult, mustn't it? I guess you may have a lot lined up for 21, maybe.
Well, things kept moving, so I need to kind of work out what's moved and the date. So one of the things that I was really looking forward to seeing was everyone's talking about Jamie, because I missed it when I was down in London. And what I was doing quite often is whenever I was down in London working, I would try and catch a show on a night. So it was brilliant. But when people say to me, "Oh, why do you live in or near Leeds?" and I'm like, "Well, because Leeds has all of these theatres. We get everything, and you just don't realise how much great stuff is on there." But I was kind of, I normally go see something at the Playhouse over Christmas, so not doing that this year. But my goodness, as soon as people can and as soon as we can start kind of funding that, because I feel so sorry for those people who are in that industry and have just had all of that taken away. I'm a massive fan of stand-up comedy as well. So the Edinburgh Festival is one of my favourite things to do every year. And I don't know how some of those people are going to earn a living right now. So as soon as the comedy clubs are back open, then, and it's safe to do so, then I'll be back to the theatre and back to the comedy clubs.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I love stand-up comedy, and it's amazing to see how many of them have had to turn to things like Facebook Live, and just to keep out there. And in fact, some of them are doing stuff that Russell Kane is now presenting on the lunch on Channel 4. With Steph McGovern, is it? And it's not a job that I think he's vocally said this. It's not a job that he really would want, but it's like, I'll take anything I can get at the moment. And it's tough to see some of the things that they're having to do to keep their audiences and keep some career going. And it's that the Edinburgh Festival. The thing about that is that it's the raw talent that is not getting the opportunity, and there'll be a whole not generation necessarily, but a whole cohort that could miss out. I think that's the shame.
Yeah, and I think it's about that opportunity. People go to Edinburgh because it's an opportunity to get spotted. And that's no different if you're a graduate in any other sector or somebody coming out of another sector trying to get spotted. It's so hard to do unless you go above and beyond. And I think that's one of the things that social media allows us is people to put stuff out there that they wouldn't have ever got an audience for in other times. When I first went to university, my mum and dad gave me a pager so that they could contact me and tell me to phone them. So I remembered to do it. That was, it was only 96. I'm not that old, but mobile phones weren't a thing, let alone some of the genius stuff that I've seen people put out over COVID. And I got, I'm sure everybody got it, sent a thing, and it was the Now Christmas tunes, and somebody had put that. Yeah. I'm sure everyone got it about 1,000 times. I was like, who is this talented person that sat down and created that? It's amazing. There's a fabulous guy, Tim, who I definitely don't mind giving a bit of a plug to, because he was put on furlough by his organisation and made redundant, but he's done some amazing graphic design for Simon, because he was like, I'm bored, I don't want to just sit here doing nothing. And then he's done some amazing stuff for the launch of my new career consultancy program. And I look at the stuff and I'm like, it's amazing. How have you made those colours look like that? Because in a million years, I would never be able to do that. And I just think, you know, giving people a chance to share that talent is so important, no matter what their talent is. And I talk about it in the book and I talk about it in the program. It's about knowing what your special and different is. And if you know what's special and different about you, you can become really confident in selling that. And that's crucial. So what's special and different about you, Johnny?
Oh, lots of things. It's not about me today, though.
Oh, sorry, away from the question.
Well, I wanted to go back to teams and leadership in organisations, where change management was a big thing that you did, and actually, what you're saying is leaders need the ability to be able to change and get teams to change. What's the barriers there? How do you make that work?
Well, it's firstly accepting that change is the C word. No one likes it. You know, if it was, I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, oh, well, it was working before, Louise. I don't know why they have to change it. You're like, because everything has to change and everything has to keep on changing. But it's also about people being not only open to change, but sharing their knowledge. I think we're still in some organizations, we've got people who want to keep their knowledge to themselves because that way they're still relevant. And I want people to empower people through coaching and mentoring and, bring on our talent and bring on our younger generation, because we're so fixed in what we think of those other groups of people and those stereotypes. It's really hard to get people to accept that they might have something to add of value. And it's really interesting now if we're looking at the market and we've got Generation Z coming into the marketplace. They're going to be looking for jobs, but they want companies that are ethical, that have CSR policies, that maybe have signed up to an environmental charter. They absolutely expect flexible working. So the expectations are different. Whereas for the first time, we've got all these different generations in an organization, and you've got your baby boomers going, I had to work to get my job. I had to prove myself. You're coming in here and expecting this. And actually, massive stereotypes. Not all of those people are thinking that, but they've built up these stereotypes. So getting them into a room to have a conversation, or even to do some thought showers and ideas sharing over Zoom, just means that they start to break down some of those barriers. And the biggest barrier to any change is the people involved in the process.
I was wondering what a thought shower was.
Well, yeah, it's a politically correct way of ideas sharing.
Well, I was going to ask something about the thought showers. Just totally thrown me off because I wanted to know more about it. I know exactly what I was going to ask you. I was just wondering, because of COVID, all the chaos that's going on and how we've all had to change. Is this an opportune moment to bring more change in, or is this a time to seize the moment and actually to bring change? Is it easier to do it now, or am I barking up the wrong tree?
I think what we need to do is make the change sustainable. So we reacted to a situation, we didn't think it through. So people are like, people love working from home. And I'm like, and how many of them are sitting at the kitchen table on a kitchen chair? We wouldn't get away with that in an office. We'd have to sit and do the desk and, okay, is your screen okay? Is your chair okay? Do you need a special chair? Whereas people have been sort of winging it for a few months from home, sitting in the spare room. That's not necessarily sustainable. And I've heard some great things about some businesses giving people money towards their home offices to buy what they want, and the standing desks are becoming really popular. So that the change that we had isn't sustainable unless we go back and make it right. So we improve the way that data's managed. I had to laugh the other day. I was on a call with somebody and they were talking to me about GDPR as people in the back of their house are walking through, and I'm like, okay, well, you're talking about data security, and I wonder if your Alexa's switched off. Because actually, if you haven't put in your policies that you need to switch your Alexa off when you're doing a Zoom, then, you know, so the policies and the procedures and all of that stuff to make it sustainable have got to catch up. And we've got to look after employees better.
But my question's deeper than that, which is around, is this a good time to change diversity and inclusion whilst chaos is going on? Is it actually now is the time to seize some of the big change that we need?
I always think it's the time to seize the change that we need, though. That's never going to be any different, because if we don't make the changes, then the changes are never going to happen. But it's got to be, again, I'm going to go back to that word sustainable. It's got to be long term. It can't just be a short term reaction, you know, to a situation. It's got to be able to be continued. You know, so just think about the universities being able to deliver what they're delivering online. That's such an opportunity for people who perhaps wouldn't have been able to go to university because they couldn't afford the accommodation or whatever else. And it creates opportunities for people who perhaps didn't have opportunities, but then they've got to have somewhere to go after that. So businesses have got to be prepared to kind of take in those people and have a path and think about people's careers as they go through. Because I think it's okay to say to somebody, I think you've outgrown this organization. You know, but we need to support them at a time when they can then go off and create other opportunities. And if maybe we have to help them to make them leap out of our organization, that's probably a better way than trying to force people out.
I like what you're saying, which is actually, you know, if we need to change, we just need to change, never mind what time it is. So you referred to that you're working on another book. So you know, any idea?
Accountable for that one though, Johnny.
I was going to say, is there a published date for that then, Louise?
No, not yet. No, because I've got so much on at the minute. And I spend my life when I'm working with teams telling them to prioritize effectively, not to bite off more than they can chew, to really make sure you do things properly. And I'm working with my team, you know, to make sure that the website's working and all of those kind of things. If I start then doing something else on top of that, I've already told you I'm not a completer finisher. I have to be ultra disciplined. Whereas the first book was easy because I had the column in the Yorkshire Post. So all I did really was take my column, put them into my program, and then make it into a book. Whereas the other one, I've got to come up with 7 steps and the same kind of cheesy titles as in the first book, because if it didn't have a bit of cheese, it wouldn't be me. So yeah, but it'll happen.
For people listening or watching, if you know, there's 3 different types of people, I guess. We've got people that are looking for that dream career. They may have been made redundant, or they may be just looking for some change. We've got people that might be already coaching, that are looking to do some career coaching and looking for some kind of accreditation. And we've also got leaders in organizations that are looking to bring change or diversification or motivate teams. What's the best way to contact you and to find you, Louise?
LinkedIn's always a good one. So luckily, and talking to somebody who does SEO, my name is really easy to find. There is only one of me, so it's really a really good way. And actually, one of the things that I always do is have a chat with people before. Anyway, I might not be right for you, but I've got an extensive network, and I'm quite happy to point you in another direction if I think somebody else is better for you. But yeah, it's everything I do is about conversation. So feel free to kind of ask me for a coffee chat. I'll be virtual for now, but at some point I'll start seeing humans again.
Brilliant. And of course, support Simon on the streets as well, if you're able to in many different ways.
And remember, we're not just for Christmas, we're there all year round. We have huge numbers of people wanting to get involved at this time of year, but my absolute thing is we're there all year.
Louise, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure it's been delightful for listeners and watchers. Please join us next time for another live Q&A. But for now, that's us out. So thanks, Louise. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Daddy.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.